Ridge, and welcome to the YouTube channel. On this channel, I talk about both software engineering and fitness-related topics. So if you're interested in either of those, feel free to stick around. So as you can probably tell by the title of today's video, what I'm going to be talking about is how I think you, or anyone for that matter, can get a job at one of these top tech companies such as Microsoft or any of the other FANG, which stands for, if you didn't know, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. I'm going to break it down into 5 simple steps that I took, and I'm going to relate my experiences and how I took these steps and how you might be able to take them too in order to get to one of these big top tech companies. And then I know that someone breaking it down like this would have been really helpful for me when I was younger, especially right when I entered college. I heard people getting jobs at these top tech companies, and I thought that, maybe this was only for Ivy League students or just people who got PhDs or just the absolute top performers. But realistically, if anyone takes the right action, they can get a job at one of these top tech companies too. So there's nothing special about it. You just need to know the rather algorithmic steps that I took and many other people take in order to get one of these jobs. All right, guys, so step number 1, I think, being probably the most and obvious step, and a lot of you have probably already started this, but I feel like it should be said, is that you need to obviously start studying computer science. So, or some sort of way to start studying programming in general. And there's a few different ways to do this, and whether or not you are just starting out in college, you've already graduated college, or you're in high school thinking about going to college, anyone can start to program at any point in time. You're never too washed up to do this or too young to start learning. But in general, I think the most common way that people probably start programming, at least the way that I started, was starting a computer science degree at university. And it doesn't have to be a computer science degree. It can be data science, computer engineering. That's actually how I started out as, but then switched to computer science more because I wasn't a fan of the hardware. But you need to know that it's not only a computer science degree from a university that'll teach you how to program well enough in order to get a job as a software engineer. There's lots of other ways you can do this. I know some people are self-taught. A lot of engineers at even Google don't have a software engineering degree. They'll be self-taught, or maybe they went to school for a few years and then built their own business on their own, and then later on transitioned to a professional job at one of the top tech companies. There's boot camps you can take. If you do a quick Google search, I'm sure you'll find coding boot camps. So a lot of these are valid options that you can take, but I think it kind of depends on where you're at in life, which route is probably right for you. I think that if you're younger, maybe starting in college, or you are just about to leave high school, then aiming for a degree in computer science at a university is probably your best bet. They'll have lots of good resources for you to be able to get jobs and internships later on and connect you with people in the field. So that's the route that I took, but again, there's plenty of options for you to begin studying software engineering. All right, guys, so step number 2, and I think that this is something that honestly isn't very commonly brought up when people are studying computer science, but I think it's super important, and that's finding your niche. And the reason I think this is super important is because you need to be passionate about what you're doing if you're going to succeed at it, right? So, there's tons of different avenues you can take within computer science, whether that be web dev, or you're more of a back-end programmer, or you like mobile app development, which is my personal favorite. By the way, if you ever want to see any mobile app videos or demonstrations of apps that I've created, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But yeah, anyways, I think it's super important to go ahead and specialize in a certain area, because when you're passionate, again, you're able to create great things and demonstrate the skills that you've learned, rather than just moseying along and learning a language here and there, because then you'll never really create a big project on your own, right? And I think that side projects are super important, and that's another thing that I'm going to get to. But there's plenty of ways to find your niche. I mean, obviously, if you start studying computer science at university, you're going to be required to take the intro classes, right? And you're going to kind of diversify at first regardless. And then throughout your degree, you'll go ahead and as you take classes, you'll be like, oh man, like maybe I really like web dev. And so you'll start taking more web dev classes. You'll be required to take electives, and then you can go and elect more web dev classes. Or on the side with your buddies, maybe you guys decide to create a website. For me, it was I took the mobile app class at my university, which I actually didn't really like. I think it was just poorly taught, but I like the concept of being able to come up with an idea and quickly create it and deliver it into a handheld device, right? It just, something comes to fruition a lot quicker when you are creating mobile apps. So that was my niche. I think you guys need to find yours, and it probably comes pretty naturally, but just make sure you kind of hone in on a skill set, and that'll probably lead into what you end up doing professionally. All right, guys, step number 3, like I mentioned in step number 2, it's important that you at some point in time start creating side projects. Now there's a couple reasons why side projects are so important. The 2 main ones being that I think that you learn a lot when you create a side project, because it forces you to diversify a skill set in order to make a whole product, right? And on top of that, it's a really good way for you to display your skill set to potential employers or business opportunities, etc., right? So for me, like I said, I created quite a few mobile apps and it taught me a lot about databases and querying data from my servers, right? Like stuff I'd never thought of when I was just creating a dinky little mobile app in class, right? So again, when you're in an interview, you can talk to the experience that you've developed while creating some sort of side project, and it might be a good way for employers to actually discover you, because say you publish said app or website, or you put it on your resume, or someone finds your GitHub profile that's linked on LinkedIn. This could be really valuable in a recruiting process or just getting a job in general and widening your skill set. All right, now let's say you've completed step numbers 1, 2, and 3, right? You've studied computer science, you found your niche, you've started to create side projects, you know what you're doing at this point, right? And I think it's that at this point, you go and find some sort of job, or in the case of being a student, you find your first internship. And for the first one, at least in my experience, I didn't aim my sights too high, right? I took the easiest local computer science internship I could find, right? Because I was applying to a lot of these bigger ones without any experience, and I just didn't look super credible to the employers. So I found a lower tier internship that was local to me, and it was able to kind of get my foot in just the professional world of software engineering, right? And so this first job was during my junior year, I believe. I picked up a software engineering, it was a co-op internship, so I did work and school at the same time. It was like 10 or 15 hours a week, and then I went full-time in the summer. It was for 9 months long. It was for a defense company, and I just did QA testing. And so QA testing is just writing unit tests. Once you get into software engineering, you'll know what unit tests are, and you probably won't like it, but it's a great way to get paid for knowing how to program, right? That's always great. And most internships for programming, they usually pay well because you're still doing at least difficult work using your experience, your valuable experience and skills that you've learned, right? So yeah, I really want to harp on this, guys. You have to get experience first, and you need to realize that your first experience is not going to be at a top tech company, but once you do get this, that kind of validates you to go and then apply for bigger tech companies later on, right? All right, guys, well, let's say you've completed steps number 1, 2, 3, and 4 at this point. You finally landed that internship, right? You're done with it. Maybe you're moving into your junior year of school where you have an internship under your belt. I think it's that at this point, you're ready to start applying to those bigger tech companies, maybe for a big internship, or if you're about to graduate, for a full-time role at one of these big top tech companies, right? And people don't really make it that obvious, but there really is a pretty algorithmic process in terms of getting an interview and passing it. And getting the interview is, like I said earlier, getting that experience and then applying. After you apply, that's when you have to get the interview, right? And pass the interview. And these interviews are hard. They're notoriously very hard, but if you study the right way, they're actually really easy, and you can break it down into a subset of problems that they'll ask you, And if you study these subset of problems, you can basically solve any of them if you have memorized more or less the general solution for these types of problems, right? And the best resource to go and study for these interviews is LeetCode. I'll put a link for that in the description. No, I'm not sponsored by LeetCode, but I think it's super important, and I think it's the single most valuable resource I used in getting a job to get at one of these top tech companies. For internships, they'll ask you questions related to these LeetCode problems. Not as much as a full-time role, but if you are interviewing for full-time role, guys, I promise you need to LeetCode grind a lot. And depending on the magnitude of the company you're applying to will depend on how hard of questions they ask you during the interviews. If it's a very top tier company, they'll ask you hard LeetCode problems. LeetCode problems are graded by easy, medium, hard, and just a general kind of baseline of how many questions I think you should do before you consider yourself ready for an interview like this is probably about 5 or so hard, 30, 40 mediums, and about 10 easy. In order for me to get an offer at both Microsoft and Amazon, I did about 100 LeetCode questions, and each question ranges from anywhere from like 20 minutes to an hour. So you guys do the math there, maybe about 80 hours worth of studying for these interviews, and in the end, it definitely pays off. If you think about it, 80 hours, that's about 2 full-time weeks of work. So yeah, definitely go ahead and study your LeetCode, guys, and apply. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and I promise you that if you follow these 5 simple steps that I've outlined in this video, you or anyone can get a job at one of these top tech companies. If you guys have interest in more videos that you'd like to hear from me, from a Microsoft software engineer, let me know in the comments down below. Again, I'm interested in both fitness related and software engineering topics. I'm kind of entrepreneurial. I am trying to create some side projects on the side, so if you'd like to hear about those, let me know as well. But other than that, I'll see you next time, guys. Peace.